A recurring historical trend has led to the downfall of three major global powers within the last 5 centuries. Astonishingly, in the year 2025, the United States appears to be meticulously retracing these same steps from one phase to the next, from one decision to another, as if guided by a predetermined script that has invariably resulted in disaster each prior instance. Back in 1590, Spain stood as the preeminent global empire, amassing half of the world's precious metals and commanding an insurmountable military force across Europe, with its currency enjoying universal acceptance. Yet, a mere 80 years later, Spain found itself financially ruined, relegated to the status of a second-tier nation from which it never truly recovered. Subsequently, in 1914, Great Britain reigned over the largest dominion in recorded history, an empire so vast that the sun never ceased its illumination of British soil. The pound sterling served as the undisputed global reserve currency. Within 4 decades, this sprawling empire had dissolved, its currency had collapsed, and Britain had transitioned into a subordinate partner to America. More recently, in 1991, the Soviet Union represented the other superpower of the era, possessing nuclear arsenals, extensive global influence, and a network of satellites encircling the planet. It vanished from existence in a mere 900 days, not due to external warfare, but rather from internal economic implosion. 3 distinct instances, 3 colossal powers, 3 complete disintegrations, all following an identical chronological progression. What should profoundly concern you is that the United States has already navigated through 5 of the 7 critical stages. We are not merely approaching this historical trajectory, we are deeply embedded within it. This is the narrative of how empires crumble, the reasons they erroneously believe themselves to be unique, and why statistical probability dictates that we are next. And this transformation is occurring at a pace far exceeding widespread acknowledgement. Before delving into the specific stages, it is imperative to grasp the tangible reality of imperial collapse, not as an abstract academic concept, but as a lived experience, what it truly signifies when a superpower falters. Imperial downfall is not precipitated by invasion or military defeat. It originates with economic exhaustion. The empire extends its reach beyond its capacity for self-sustenance. Military installations scattered across 150 nations, engagements on multiple fronts, unfulfilled pledges, and unmanageable debt. Initially, this decline remains imperceptible. The currency still functions, the military still secures victories, and the government continues to issue assurances. However, beneath the veneer, the foundational structures begin to fracture. Resources are misallocated, productive output diminishes, and the most talented individuals seek opportunities elsewhere. Subsequently, an acceleration occurs. Allies begin to distance themselves. Adversaries probe boundaries, and trading partners explore alternative arrangements. The esteemed position of the reserve currency erodes. Suddenly, the very advantages that cemented your power transmute into vulnerabilities. The currency, once universally sought after, inundates the domestic economy. Your globally dispersed military becomes untenable. Your pronouncements, once buttressed by strength, devolve into empty rhetoric. This is not a theoretical construct. It is precisely what transpired with Spain, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union. And it occurred because they made the identical decisions we are currently enacting. They erroneously believed their supremacy was immutable. They overextended their military capabilities. They devalued their currency, and they refused to confront reality until the collapse was already in motion. Let us examine how this unfolded precisely the same way on 3 separate occasions. We commence with the inaugural global empire, Spain, spanning the 16th and 17th centuries. This represents the original paradigm. Following Christopher Columbus's discovery of the Americas in 1492, Spain ascended to become the first true global power. They subjugated the Aztec and Inca empires, thereby gaining control of the most significant sources of gold and silver ever unearthed. By 1550, Spanish galleons were transporting 200 tons of silver annually back to Spain. By 1600, this figure surpassed 400 tons per year. Spain effectively dictated Europe's monetary supply, and the Spanish real functioned as the global reserve currency, with Spanish silver in high demand worldwide. This is precisely where the pattern commences. With a nation that controls the world's finances and mistakenly concludes this, grants them invincibility. King Philip II, who reigned from 1556 to 1598, possessed more wealth than any monarch in history, and he allocated this vast fortune towards maintaining his empire. Stage 1. Military overextension. Spain engaged in simultaneous conflicts across numerous theaters of operation, against the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, against France and Italy, against Protestant insurgents in the Netherlands, against the English Navy, and in campaigns within the Americas and the Philippines. By 1580, Spain bore military responsibilities on 4 continents. The financial burden was immense, with half of Spain's revenue channeled into its military, yet it proved insufficient. Stage 2. Currency debasement. The Spanish crown found itself unable to meet its financial obligations solely through taxation. Consequently, they resorted to the common practice of failing empires, debasing the currency. They began to alloy their silver coins with copper. A coin originally intended to be pure silver progressively comprised 50% copper, then 75% copper. While the nominal value remained unchanged, its intrinsic worth plummeted. By 1600, Spanish silver coins contained negligible amounts of silver. Merchants began to refuse them at their face value, triggering rampant inflation. Stage 3. Debt spiral. Spain engaged in continuous borrowing from Italian and German financiers, and indeed from any entity willing to extend credit. By 1557, less than 20 years into Philip's reign, Spain declared bankruptcy. They defaulted on their obligations, underwent restructuring, and resumed their borrowing. They declared bankruptcy again in 1560, once more in 1575, and yet again in 1596. This constituted 4 bankruptcies within a 40-year span. Each instance was accompanied by promises of reform, only to be followed by a return to borrowing and excessive spending. Stage 4. Loss of productive capacity. A critical misunderstanding regarding Spain's decline pertains to its immense wealth in gold and silver, which paradoxically became its undoing. When a nation possesses seemingly limitless financial resources, its incentive to produce dwindles. Why cultivate food when it can be imported? Why construct ships when they can be procured? Why innovate when expenditure is effortless? The Spanish nobility regarded labor as beneath them. Manufacturing declined, agriculture stagnated, and all acquired wealth was funneled into importing goods from other nations. The precious metals extracted from the Americas were immediately repatriated to purchase French wines, Italian silks, and Dutch commodities. Spain transformed into a mere transit point. Wealth flowed through it, but none of it remained. By 1600, Spain's domestic production had virtually ceased. It had become wholly reliant on imports and entirely dependent on silver to finance these acquisitions. When the silver mines began to deplete and production declined, the entire economic edifice crumbled. Stage 5. Social decay. With the economy in ruins, crime proliferated. Madrid became inundated with beggars. Productive citizens emigrated. The most intelligent individuals relocated to France, England, and the Netherlands. Nations actively engaged in construction, creation, and expansion. Spain was left populated by bureaucrats, soldiers, and clergy, with no one generating wealth and everyone consuming it. By 1640, Spain lost Portugal. By 1650, it relinquished the Netherlands, its most prosperous territory. By 1700, the Spanish Empire was a mere husk, still substantial on paper, but economically defunct. It transitioned from a global superpower to a secondary power in less than a century, a status from which it never recuperated. Modern-day Spain is a regional European country, pleasant and culturally rich, but globally insignificant. The descendants of the conquistadors now operate as a tourist attraction. Such is the trajectory of imperial collapse. Let us now fast forward 3 centuries to Britain in the 20th century, the empire upon which the sun never set. At its zenith, Britain governed 25% of the world's landmass, encompassing 400 million subjects. The pound sterling served as the global reserve currency. All significant trade agreements were denominated in pounds, and virtually every central bank held British government bonds. London was the undisputed financial nucleus of the world. And akin to Spain 3 centuries prior, Britain operated under the delusion of permanence. However, they were already ensnared in the pattern. Stage 1. Military overextension. By 1900, Britain maintained military commitments across the globe, in India, Africa, the Middle East, China, the Pacific, and the Caribbean. It was obligated to defend territories on 6 continents. The financial toll was immense. When the First World War erupted in 1914, Britain faced a critical juncture: remain neutral and allow Europe to tear itself apart, or enter the conflict and risk bankrupting the empire in pursuit of victory. They opted to fight. The First World War exacted a cost of over $40 billion from Britain, equivalent to $1 trillion in today's currency. They resorted to borrowing from numerous sources, predominantly from the United States. By 1918, Britain owed America billions, effectively reversing the roles of creditor and debtor, yet they had emerged victorious in the war and retained their empire. They harbored the belief that they could rebuild. They were mistaken. Stage 2. Currency debasement. The pound sterling was theoretically backed by gold, but the war had drastically depleted Britain's gold reserves. Significant quantities of gold had been transferred to America to finance the acquisition of weaponry, provisions, and supplies. By 1920, Britain's gold reserves had been halved compared to 1914. Nevertheless, they attempted to artificially sustain the pound's value. In 1925, they rejoined the gold standard at the pre-war exchange rate. The fundamental issue was that the pound was overvalued, rendering British exports prohibitively expensive. This led to a decline in manufacturing, a rise in unemployment, and compelled the government to maintain high interest rates to defend the currency, consequently crippling the domestic economy. By 1931, they could no longer sustain this charade. Britain abandoned the gold standard, and the pound depreciated by 25% overnight. The global reserve currency had effectively admitted its inability to honor its commitments. Stage 3. Debt spiral. Britain never truly recovered from the debt incurred during the First World War, and then the Second World War commenced, adding another $120 billion in expenses. This necessitated further borrowing from America. By 1945, Britain owed the United States and Canada more than $30 billion, a sum exceeding Britain's entire gross domestic product. While the war was won, the empire's fate was sealed. They could no longer afford to defend it, maintain it, or sustain it. Stage 4. Loss of empire. In 1947, Britain relinquished control of India, its prized possession and source of wealth for 2 centuries, now lost. Over the subsequent 2 decades, they ceded all their territories in Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and the Caribbean. By 1970, the British Empire existed only in historical texts. Stage 5. Currency collapse. The value of the pound continued its downward trajectory. In 1940, £1 was equivalent to $4.03. By 1950, it was $2.80. By 1970, $2.40. By 1980, $2.30. Today, it stands at approximately $1.27. The erstwhile global reserve currency had been reduced to a regional one. Britain attempted to maintain an appearance of continued prominence, retaining a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council, possessing nuclear capabilities, and fostering a special relationship with America. However, the reality was evident to all. It was a former power, a historical exhibit of past greatness. The empire had vanished and never reappeared. Let us now examine the most recent historical precedent, the Soviet Union, from 1945 to 1991. Following the Second World War, the USSR emerged as a global superpower armed with nuclear weapons, exerting significant military control over Eastern Europe and deploying satellites in orbit. They genuinely believed they represented the future, that communism would ultimately triumph over capitalism, and that the Soviet model would dominate the world. For 45 years, they engaged in a protracted competition with America, matching its military might, producing more tanks, missiles, and troops. Yet, beneath this formidable facade, its economy was in decline. Stage 1. Military overextension. The Soviet Union allocated between 15 and 20% of its gross domestic product to its military, a figure triple that of America's expenditure. They felt compelled to match American technological advancements, global reach, and alliance structures. However, their economy was a mere fraction of America's size. They were actively involved in Afghanistan, propping up Cuba, supporting Syria, Vietnam, North Korea, Angola, and Ethiopia. Virtually every region where America exerted influence, they felt obliged to counter at an unsustainable cost. Stage 2. Economic stagnation. The Soviet economy ceased to grow in the 1970s. While oil revenues provided a temporary buffer, all other sectors faltered. Factories churned out subpar products, agricultural output declined, and technological development lagged by decades. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was importing grain, a nation possessing some of the world's most fertile land, unable to feed its own populace. The reason? Centralized planning proved ineffective, innovation withered under state control, and a lack of incentives stifled productivity. Stage 3. Currency collapse. The ruble never functioned as a true currency. It was not convertible on international markets, and even Soviet citizens exhibited a lack of confidence in it, opting for dollars whenever accessible. The government was compelled to purchase foreign goods with gold and oil because no one would accept rubles. By 1985, a decline in oil prices coincided with dwindling Soviet gold reserves, signaling a depletion of tangible financial resources. Stage 4. Loss of empire. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, and Eastern European nations began to secede, including Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, and East Germany, all within a single year. The satellite states that provided the Soviet Union with strategic depth vanished. The Soviet government proved incapable of preventing this exodus, having been rendered financially destitute. Stage 5. Complete collapse. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. A mere 900 days elapsed from the fall of the Berlin Wall to its total dissolution. There was no war, no invasion, only an implosion driven by economic failure. The military could not be compensated, the government could not function, and the ruble became worthless. A superpower possessing 30,000 nuclear weapons disintegrated due to internal economic breakdown. The pattern repeated itself. Overextension, currency failure, debt accumulation, loss of dominion, and eventual collapse. And this is what should profoundly trouble you. The United States is currently adhering to the exact same pattern. Let me illustrate each stage. Stage 1. Military overextension. The United States maintains over 750 military bases in 80 countries and has troops stationed in 150 nations. We are committed to defending Europe through NATO, as well as Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. We are engaged in conflicts in the Middle East and are actively countering the influence of China and Russia. Our annual military budget stands at $850 billion, exceeding the combined budgets of the next 10 countries. Despite this immense expenditure, it is insufficient. We are overextended. Our equipment is aging, recruitment is declining, and we have made commitments that we are incapable of fulfilling. Should China invade Taiwan, Russia advance into NATO territory, or Iran obstruct the Persian Gulf, we would be unable to respond to all these contingencies simultaneously. We are in essence overextended, precisely as Spain, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union were. This stage is checked. Stage 2. Currency debasement. In 1971, President Nixon severed the dollar's link to gold, transforming it into a pure fiat currency. Since the year 2000, the money supply has expanded by 400%. From 2020 alone, we have injected over $6 trillion into the economy. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971. While we are not literally mixing copper into silver coins, we are engaged in unrestrained paper currency printing. The methodology differs, but the outcome remains identical. Debasement. This stage is checked. Stage 3. Debt spiral. The United States carries a national debt of $36 trillion, which represents 120% of its gross domestic product. Annual interest payments alone are approaching $1 trillion. We are allocating more resources to interest payments than to defense. We consistently operate with annual deficits, with a projected deficit of $1.8 trillion in 2024, even within a growing economy. During peacetime, we borrow money to cover interest on prior borrowings. This is the very definition of a debt spiral. Spain defaulted 4 times, Britain borrowed until its collapse, and the Soviet Union simply ran out of funds. We are traversing the same path. This stage is checked. Stage 4. Loss of productive capacity. America no longer manufactures goods on a significant scale. We excel in design, finance, and consumption, but our production capabilities have diminished. Our manufacturing base has been severely eroded, with production shifted to China, Mexico, and Vietnam. Annually, we import $800 billion more than we export. We are dependent on foreign supply chains for an array of essential goods, including medicine, electronics, steel, and even military components. Just as Spain became reliant on imports while its silver flowed outward, we are now dependent on imports while dollars flow outward. And mirroring Spain's predicament, when the inflow of currency ceases, we will face severe challenges. This stage is checked. Stage 5. Social decay. Public trust in institutions has reached unprecedented lows. Crime rates are escalating, homelessness is surging, and drug overdoses claim 100,000 American lives annually. The most capable and intelligent individuals are either immigrating or disengaging. Fertility rates are plummeting, and political dysfunction is rampant. We are incapable of reaching consensus on any significant issue, solving fundamental problems, or undertaking constructive projects. The signs of societal decay are omnipresent, yet there is a pervasive pretense that everything is acceptable. It is not acceptable. This stage is checked. We have now reached stage 5 out of 7. The Soviet Union met its demise at stage 5. Great Britain also reached this point before its ultimate decline. Spain endured longer, but the underlying pattern remained consistent. We have not yet reached the conclusion, but we are deeply entrenched within the sequence. Stage 6 is the erosion of reserve currency status. This occurs when allied nations begin to diversify their holdings, when international trade shifts to alternative currencies, and when the dollar rapidly returns home because there is no longer a global demand for it. We are already witnessing nascent indicators of this phenomenon. The BRICS nations are actively developing alternatives. Central banks are increasing their gold reserves. China and Russia are conducting trade in yuan and rubles, respectively. Saudi Arabia has begun accepting yuan for oil transactions. The fissures are beginning to appear. Stage 7 is collapse. This is not a gradual decline, but a swift and sudden implosion. The Soviet Union transitioned from superpower status to non-existence in a mere 900 days. Great Britain lost its empire within 2 decades. Spain's decline took longer, but the ultimate outcome was the same. When the reserve currency falters, when debt becomes unmanageable, and when the military can no longer be adequately funded, the decline is not graceful. It is rapid and brutal. And all those who believed such an eventuality was impossible will learn the same lesson every empire has eventually confronted. It can, and it does happen. 3 empires have followed this precise trajectory: Spain, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union. Each independently believed itself to be exceptional, distinct, and exempt from universal principles. They were unequivocally mistaken on every occasion. We are currently perpetuating the same fallacies. We assert our uniqueness, our technological superiority, the enduring strength of the dollar, and our American exceptionalism. However, the pattern is indifferent to such claims. It is a matter of mathematical certainty. Perpetual overspending beyond one's means is unsustainable. An empire cannot be sustained without a robust, productive capacity. Currency debasement inevitably carries consequences. Once stages 1 through 5 have been completed, stages 6 and 7 cannot be averted. The sequence is irrevocably set. The sole variable is the timeline. Perhaps we have 10 years, perhaps 5, or perhaps even less. But the historical pattern strongly suggests that collapse is imminent. And when it arrives, it will not be a gradual process, it will be sudden. A currency crisis will trigger a debt crisis, which in turn will precipitate a political crisis. Overnight, a superpower will be relegated to a cautionary tale. A reserve currency will transform into a regional one. An empire will become a mere memory. This sequence has unfolded 3 times previously. The pattern indicates that we are next. Since the year 2020, we have significantly accelerated each stage, printing unprecedented amounts of money, accumulating substantial debt, expanding military commitments, dismantling our production capabilities, and fracturing our society. We are no longer walking this path. We are sprinting down it, with the end now visible to those who understand the pattern. Perhaps we will discover an alternative route. Perhaps America can achieve what Spain, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union could not. Perhaps we will implement reforms, rebuild our nation, and restore its former glory. Perhaps this time truly is different. However, the established pattern suggests otherwise. The mathematical probabilities indicate otherwise, and history, which has witnessed empires collapse in precisely the same manner time and again, indicates that we are about to learn this lesson the hard way. If this analysis has illuminated your understanding of our current position within this historical sequence, please subscribe, as you will want to comprehend what transpires and why when we inevitably reach stages 6 and 7. The answers are not hidden in the future, they are clearly inscribed in the past, and I will guide you to where they can be found.